You're watching Arise Prime Time, and I have a guest commentator with me for the rest of the program. He'll be giving his thoughts on the news and issues of the day, and he is the current affairs analyst as well as Professor of Communications at Baze University here in Abuja, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi. Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, good evening, Adeswa. Well done.
I mean, political parties in Nigeria, whether you look at the big ones or the emerging ones or small ones, as we like to call them, there's crises everywhere. And they're quick to run to the courts, especially in the case of ABGA, which we discussed tonight. But what do you think is driving all of this crisis in these small parties?
I think, if you look at it critically, I think they are just practically chasing shadows. And one thing they need to understand is that in the sociology of litigation, it becomes even much more difficult for you to resolve a dispute when you externalize it, when a third party is involved. And in this case, we're talking about the judiciary. For political parties, when the judiciary is relied on for the resolution of disputes, it takes away the naturalness, the soul, the bond that is supposed to exist among the community of people constituted the parties, and becomes much more difficult for them to have genuine reconciliation. And because it's also escapist, So I had, I think your first guest saying saying severally that they called the Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court, yes.
And it's very, very difficult in that circumstance to have a genuine reconciliation. I beg your pardon. If you remember the PDP crisis those days, when Modu Sharif was declared by the court as the chairman, it was just left alone because that was not a clinical representation of the soul of the party until it was eased off and we had another person emerge and became chairman. I can't remember who that person is now. And before we now had PDP regaining its steam and sailing ahead, irrespective of the recent crisis that has been bedeviling the party. But that said, that's the implication of constant resort to court. But of course, for the smaller parties, you also wonder, why the constant disagreement. That's why I was saying that they are just chasing shadows. I think it borders sometimes on needless pride, needless prestige, needless craze, to boost ego. Maybe you can also situate it within the larger space, where people want to put themselves in good positions for negotiation, so that they can get rewards, they can get people loyal to them, they can get compensation, pursuant to the overarching craze, for material progress. And that might be the case, really. Otherwise, their primary objective should be putting themselves in a prime position to capture power so that they can influence, governance. They can bring about good governance, impact the life of the people. The primary, ordinary vision of an ideal political party in the first instance. So they often deviate from this and sometimes try to think that the self-aggrandizing intention should be prioritized. And of course, if you're not agreeing with me, I'm not going to agree with you. Otherwise, you will just see that there's actually no need, if you look at it critically, there's actually no need for some of these endless back and
we
forth.
don't see the compromise. I mean, something must give. In the case of the Labour Party, where you have Peter Obi, Alex Oti on the one hand, and the caretaker committee, they have now set up 29-member committee. And on the other hand, you have the Abure, and of course, an imagined chairman that the party is even denying, Callistus Okafor. Do you think that this caretaker committee that has been set up, is a viable solution to their problems? Is it just a band-aid?
The Labour Party one is also very tricky. I'm actually hearing that your last guest is a chairman,
as he calls himself.
I'm hearing that there's also a factional chairman, as the case could be. But of course, one thing the Labour Party people, the Julius Abure people, the Callistus, one thing they seem to be forgetting is that nobody probably reckoned with the Labour Party in the build-up to the 2023 presidential election until the Peter Obi effect came into the party. And of course, it reffed off the influence of the party and, of course, gave the other parties a good fight. A run for their money, a very good fight. And almost became president. And
in the space of less than a year.
Less than a year. And there's nothing they can say between himself and his vice presidential candidate, Senator Dati. And they almost took over power. And it was because of their personality.
Let's not forget they even won Lagos.
They won Lagos and won
so many other states.
Yeah, that's right. So this influence is still subsisting, and it's a great advantage for them, something that one would have thought they would have leveraged on to build the party, forgetting all these fights. And of course, yes, they've not been able to build on it. There have been people who have actually chastised former Governor Peter Obi for not reining in. So I know Kenneth Okonkwo, for instance, left the party because he said His Excellency Peter Obi didn't didn't come in to resolve the crisis, and probably acting on those pressure, I thought alongside Governor of Abia State that they should do something, and that's why probably they called the stakeholder meeting. He said they didn't call him. I'm not sure. I know probably many of them will have been called, but maybe they thought that they're not going to gain traction there, so they should just pull away. And they call a stakeholder meeting, which looks reconciliatory, charting a way forward. And of course, us observers were somewhat pleased that at the end of the day, the party can actually regain its traction. There will be some peace, to put them on a very good pedestal, for the next general election. And even before the next general election, what about the off-season elections, that are coming, like the Angels visit? They can also still make a very strong statement in those elections, in the build-up to the general election. But with constant fighting, disputation over nothing, you begin to wonder, why are they just concerned about chasing shadow, if not the arguments I made earlier?
Yeah. So there's also the, argument about party versus individual.
Yeah.
Is it a case of strong individuals or strong men, as we say, this party is building themselves around individuals as against the other way around, where the party should be stronger than the individuals? Could that be the problem we're seeing with these smaller parties? I wanted to ask you that. And then for Labour Party, again, because it was seen as a reformist party, a viable thought force, that will give others a run for their money. Going into some elections, off-cycle elections, and even the 2027 elections, do you think the party can survive this crisis?
It's going to be maybe first, let's look at the first poser that you raised. Sometimes the institution may be strong enough, but in our situation, we'll find that institutions are generally weak, including the political institutions. So you need strong individuals to build those institutions. And that's why we often say there's a dialectics between the individual and, of course, the institution. In the case of a Labour Party, for instance, without necessarily flattering him, his personality was good enough, to grow the Labour Party as an institution, because he brought them into a reckoning. Some other parties were even much more recognized than Labour Party until he came in, and so that they could have leveraged on that, consistent with the ability of individuals. That's the units, influencing the whole in the dialectics of processes and procedure. But of course, it does appear again that they are letting that opportunity slip away, with their constant, with their quarrelsome nature, even disagreeing with what looks like a crisis resolution mechanism, through the instrument of the stakeholder meeting in Abia. But again, there's nothing else that can be done other than what the Labour Party presidential candidate said last year, that in times like this, what you need to continue to do is reconciliation, reconciliation, and reconciliation. That's the advice we can just give to them if the party itself want to continue to be reckoned with. Otherwise, the Peter Obi that we know, with the statement he made in Labour Party last year, he can still make that statement on the platform of another party. It's interesting you bring that, because I recall interviewing former Governor Peter Obi in the run-up to the elections when, in fact, the day he left the PDP, Arise News had an exclusive interview with him on this very set, the studio. And I did ask him why he was leaving the PDP, and he talked about the crisis of the party. And here he is in the Labour Party with the same crisis. Maybe just it speaks to his character again. We are in a system where there's been so much story about lethargy, about the decline of value, and of course affecting other sectors of our social lives. You know, so when you see individuals that are different, that are ready to offer, that are ready to change the narrative, and they are consistent at it, it becomes very welcoming, especially for the teeming population of this country. Not just teeming population, but a population, you know, dominated by the youths. You know, youths that are angry, eager for change. And when you see a change agent, you know, in a political party, you know, a political party system that is obfuscated by prebendalism, materialism, you know, it becomes really a cherry thing, you know, for you to see somebody who is ready to be different. Indeed. And I think that's the picture that Peter Obi caught. And I think for a very long time, he will continue to enjoy it. Perhaps
we should start speaking about independent candidacy in our electoral system and our democratic journey. But that'll be a conversation for another time.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi of the Baze University and Arise News Analyst. Well, that's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Do join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja. Goodbye, and thank you for watching.